You go to the doctor, you get that lab requisition, you're like, yes, I'm finally gonna have answers. You get your lab work done, you get it back, and the doctor goes, everything looks in range or nothing's significant here, so maybe try eating less, moving more. Less than 4% of the population is metabolically healthy. That's really important to understand when we're looking at normal reference ranges, because normal isn't healthy. How to kind of go over your labs and figure out what's preventing fat loss, how to go about it, the difference between, functional and optimal ranges and what's quote unquote normal. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast, where we help you understand this new body of yours. Now that you've gone through some hormonal changes, or maybe you're post-menopause, let's face it, those old fat loss strategies really aren't working anymore. So it is time to understand that your body is inherently different. We need to start working with it instead of against it, so you can unlock those fat-burning pathways, get your energy back, and feel confident again. So today is actually a replay of a webinar that we hosted that was way too good not to share, and we titled it Unlocking Your Fat Loss Code, What Your Labs Are Trying to Tell You, Even if everything looks quote unquote normal. And so we covered so much. We decoded what your lab markers actually mean that your doctors could be missing, identifying hormonal blocks to your fat loss, how to build a fat burning plan that is unique to your specific data and what it means. And then of course, finally feel like your body is working with you instead of against you. And so I hope you enjoyed this as much as everyone who was on the webinar. Again, it was too good not to share. So if you did enjoy this, make sure you share it with other women in your life. Okay, so welcome everyone on tonight's webinar / masterclass. Carrie Anna and I are going to be covering how to kind of go over your labs and figure out what's preventing fat loss, how to go about it, really understanding things, the difference between, functional and optimal ranges and what's quote unquote normal, because it's really frustrating when you feel like you're doing all the right things and nothing is working. And then you look at your lab markers and it's told it's normal and you just don't know where to start. And so we're going to kind of decode all of that for you tonight. We have done specific podcast episodes on a few of these things. And so there's a couple of things that we'll touch on briefly, because if we go as in depth as we can, this could easily be like a 4-hour webinar. And so we've really tried to simplify things as best as we could. With the email that we'll have the replay for you guys as well. Coming out on Friday, we will link all the different podcasts in the actual guide that we'll do for you as well. So if there's something that you're like, oh, this was flagged for me, or I think this is the issue, you can dive deeper into that as well. So I just want to give you a heads up on that, because this is a topic that we could dive so deep into and be here forever. And we don't want to take up your Tuesday evening from everyone, right? So what we want to do is really understand lab markers, women's health, fat loss, all the things. So you've probably heard it before. Maybe you've been there, right? You go to the doctor, you get that lab requisition, you're like, yes, I'm finally going to have answers. You get your lab work done, you get it back, and the doctor goes, everything looks in range, or nothing's significant here. So, maybe try eating less, moving more. That's the advice that we hear, right? And our lab markers can mean a lot more than we may actually think when it comes to the body and how it's responding to, fat burning and fat storing. And are we overactive in our storing state? Are we seeing a blocked fat burning pathway? And so we really want to help you understand how these key lab markers actually impact your hormones, your metabolism, your energy, your body composition, fat storage. And these markers are going to offer insight into whether the body is in a state that is going to support fat loss and muscle maintenance, or, your overall well-being, or if we're in a place where, it's not, right? We got to make some changes. And so functional testing that we're going to talk about as well goes way beyond what is normal, because, normal means if you're outside that range, so we can give you a pill. Right? That's basically what that means. Or you're already struggling with whatever the condition may be. We want to make sure that we are being proactive. So Carrie Anna will take it away with the differences with the functional and optimal ranges and normal.
Okay, so as Steph said, what are functional versus optimal versus normal ranges for lab work? So we wanted to kind of start there. In lab work, what we call a functional range, quote unquote, refers to maybe tighter or more health-focused reference values. And we use those to detect imbalances kind of before they become these really serious clinical problems. Now, that's a little bit different actually than our optimal range, which is often even narrower than our functional range, because that represents levels from your lab work at which the body actually functions at its best. So it's kind of the same way, like there's always this kind of talk around, oh, well, you don't have to eat that much protein to kind of survive and maintain your muscle. But at the same time, when we're looking at the goals that we want to have, us having the minimum amount of protein is not the same as us having the optimal amount of protein for building muscle and having the physique or the body composition that we want, right? Now, in contrast, the standard or maybe the reference range provided by most labs is actually based on statistical averages of the entire population, which usually includes a lot of really unhealthy individuals. So, functional and optimal ranges are commonly used obviously more in like integrative and functional medicine or practices or coaching to guide more early intervention, help improve our systems, and support our long-term wellness and health. Even if those traditional labs kind of show results as normal, again, they may not be in the functional range, and for most of us, they're probably not in the optimal range either. So let's look at some key lab markers first and foremost. That's kind of what the call is about, so I'm so excited. That may have more of an impact than we think to our health and our goals. And the first one is the one that we talk about the absolute most. So, Steph, I'm really excited to get started on that one.
Yeah, so we're going to start with the thyroid first because this is something a lot of women struggle with. But when we're talking about like that normal reference range, Carrie and I made a point that I really want to emphasize here, which is that it's based on the statistical averages of the entire population, right? It's something as less than 4% of the population is metabolically healthy. And so it is based off of population that we are actually not in the best health, right? Only 4% are metabolically healthy. So that's really important to understand when we're looking at normal reference ranges, because normal isn't healthy, right? When we look everywhere, it's not healthy, right? And so that's something I want to hit home is normal doesn't mean optimal. It doesn't mean health either. Because yeah, we'll dive deeper into that. So talking about thyroid, we're going to talk about a few different things: TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, and TPO antibodies. We talk about thyroid testing a lot, so this might not be super new for some of you. We did a podcast on this not too long ago. So if you go get thyroid testing done, highly recommend you go listen to that podcast. Again, it will be in the guide for you guys. But the thyroid matters so much because it sets the pace for your entire metabolism. Even just a slight dysfunction can cause poor energy, mood changes, an inability to burn fat, hormonal imbalances. And so when we're looking at the thyroid panel and everything that it encompasses, or should encompass, I should say, I could go on a rant about this for a while too, but first we have TSH. This is the classic thing that your doctor is going to test, and it reflects how hard your brain is telling your thyroid to work. So the optimal range is 0.5 to 2.5. If it is too high, that may indicate hypothyroidism, where you're struggling with energy, weight gain, constipation, blocked fat burning pathways. It means that your brain is screaming at your thyroid to produce more thyroid hormone. If it's too low, it could suggest hyperthyroidism or pituitary dysfunction, where we start experiencing more anxiety, we're wired and tired, we have a higher stress response. And so you're already producing so much thyroid hormone that you don't need as much of that signal from your brain to your thyroid to produce it. So that's TSH. Then we have something called free T3. This is the inactive thyroid hormone that converts to T3. So if we have low T4, we have poor thyroid output and low energy. So this means you're going to see some blocked fat burning there. And so TSH, how much your brain is telling your thyroid to produce. T4 is how much of that thyroid hormone is actually being produced. Then we have free T3. This is so important. This is the actual active form of your thyroid hormone that drives metabolism, how good your body is at burning calories and producing energy. If it is low, you can struggle with energy, you can struggle with cold intolerance, weight gain, brain fog, and a body that is not good at burning calories. So you have T4, which is the inactive form, and then T3. We need to convert T4 to T3 to be able to use it. Then we have reverse T3, which is an inactive form produced under stress or calorie restriction, and it blocks T3 from being able to go to the receptor. So you have these receptors that are like the lock, and then you have the key, which is T3. Reverse T3 is almost like a bunch of rust or things that are blocking the hole so that the key can't get in. And so your body could be producing enough T3, but if we have too much reverse T3, it can't actually be used. And so then this is where we really start to struggle. And we see this happen a lot, especially for people who have been eating low calorie for too long, doing restriction for too long, or way too severely, or under a lot of stress. And then we also see with thyroid hormones that we want them to test your TPO antibodies. This is going to indicate an autoimmune thyroid disease. So if you have a high TPO, this can be, indicative of Hashimoto's, even if TSH is normal. And this is going to keep your storing pathways on in particular and really drive inflammation, which will block your fat burning even more. And so to kind of highlight a kind of a scenario, your brain is like you telling your thyroid, your daughter Stacy, to do her chores, do her chores, do her chores. When she does her chores and does the dishes, we get a nice clean house, good straight A's. That is your free T4, right? So it's being produced. If your brain isn't telling your thyroid to produce stuff, we're going to see T4 start to decrease, which means T3 will probably go down because it's not being converted over. And so this is the issue that I have with so many doctors, is that they don't, or there's stupid rules from province to province, state to state, where if TSH is normal, they won't test the other stuff. But we know if your T3 is low, we're going to have issues. If your reverse T3 is high, going to have issues. If your T4 is low, we're going to have issues. And the reason they don't test is because there's not typically medications for those things, which is really frustrating. And so what we want to see is, okay, is your body able to produce thyroid hormone? Can it convert thyroid hormone? Or is something blocking the receptors? Because all of those things are going to impact your ability to feel good, have energy, but also be able to lose weight. And so then we can assess, okay, is this a conversion problem? Do we have to bring down inflammation? Okay, does this mean that we have, inflammation's too high there? Do we have too much stress, or we need to bring your calories up because reverse T3 is too high? Those numbers will dictate where are you in your journey. Do we have to eat more and go into recovery first before you can go into fat loss? Is there something like liver health wise that we can help and improve conversion? And so these are the things that really provide such a good insight for us to really understand, what does your body actually need? Why are these lab numbers low, or why are they trending in the direction that they're trending? Because if we're seeing something go up that we don't want to go up, or something go down that we don't want to go down, we need to figure out, why is that happening? How can we stop that from happening? As opposed to, let's just wait until it gets worse. Let's just wait until it gets worse, because then we got a very deep hole to dig ourselves out of. And so that's thyroid specifically. We did a whole hour podcast on thyroid alone. So if you're struggling with thyroid stuff, go watch that podcast episode. I'll pop it in the chat here for you guys as well, but it'll be in the guide for you guys on Friday as well.
Okay.
And yes, those blood panels can be done in men also.
Yes.
Yes.
A little bit different optimal ranges for men, of course, versus women, but yes, definitely can be done. The next one we want to talk about is vitamin D, because we actually see this quite a bit. Vitamin D acts like a hormone. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. It regulates things like immunity, inflammation, insulin sensitivity, sex hormone production in the body. So very, very important vitamin for ourselves, especially if we live in like any of the northern states, or like in Canada, or in like north of the northern hemisphere. Usually we don't get a lot of sun sometimes in the winter. So it's very important that we do get vitamin D from other sources. Our optimal ranges that we'd like to look at for vitamin D are typically either between 75 and 125 nanomoles per liter, or 30 and 50 nanograms per milliliter, depending on where you live. If we have low levels of vitamin D outside of these optimal ranges, this can impair energy. It can make our immune system worse, so we get sick all the time. It can disrupt our insulin sensitivity and lead to insulin resistance, or contribute to insulin resistance. It can disrupt our bone health and it can disrupt our hormone production. One other thing that we recently learned, which I actually didn't know, is vitamin D, which makes sense, can actually impact muscle gain and maintenance of muscle as well. So if you're low on vitamin D, you sometimes cannot maintain your muscle as well either. Now, the symptoms of deficiency are fatigue, depression, poor fat loss, so an inability to lose fat, metabolism that's not responding very well to us, immune issues like constantly getting sick or not able to recover from certain sicknesses. One thing I do want to warn you against, though, is if you are also too high, those are symptoms that are negative too. So we can see people who have depressive symptoms, muscle weakness, still an inability to gain muscle. So those kind of things are very important to be aware of. Is if we have low vitamin D, we shouldn't just be blasting our body with vitamin D and then we end up having stuff that's too high. And then, the bell curve to everything, especially when it comes to lab work or like vitamins and mineral levels in our body, is that, too high or too low of the same thing can kind of have the same negative results for a lot of people. So making sure we're doing everything in moderation is very important.
Okay, so there are a couple questions here that I do want to answer.
Yep.
Okay, so labs said TSH 0.19, very, very, very low there. So your brain is not sending the signal to your thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. And then free T4 is 1.21, which optimally is actually just on the cusp of being low. And so it sounds like your thyroid is not super great at producing T4, but also your TSH is not being sent, right? And so what we see a lot of the times is when TSH is low, that's stress. I always like to give the example of, okay, you're yelling at your thyroid or like nagging your daughter to do chores. And then you have your other child who starts, Kleenex trying to light it on fire. And you're like, oh, I got to save my house. And so then you stop nagging your daughter because you're dealing with your crazy toddler son. And now she's no longer doing what she's supposed to be doing. And so this is very closely tied to under eating, high stress. Low TSH is that's what we typically see, is that it has to do with that stress response where your brain is not prioritizing your thyroid to produce T4. It's prioritizing usually yelling at your adrenals to provide you with energy, pulling you into that like fight or flight type state. And when that happens, what we see is your body wants to preserve energy. Like it has all this demand it's trying to meet. And so it's trying to preserve energy and therefore slows down your thyroid to kind of hold on to everything. It puts you into that fat storing state. And so for you, I would say we definitely need to make sure that we are paying attention to stress for sure. Okay, perfect. Next one we're going to talk about is lipid panels. So we did a whole podcast on cholesterol itself once upon a time. Honestly, I feel like it's like episode 80 or something. Like it was a long time ago now. I should probably do it again. But we do have one. And so why does it matter? It matters because cholesterol is actually the raw material for making estrogen, for making progesterone, and for making testosterone. And so if you don't have enough cholesterol, you have a really hard time producing hormones. And if our hormones aren't being produced, we know it's going to slow down all the functions in your body, right? We're going to be more tired. We're going to have a harder time putting on muscle mass. There's going to be more inflammation. So we need to make sure we're getting adequate cholesterol in our diets, in our body, right? Lipid markers also are going to reveal inflammation and your metabolic health. So when we talk about metabolic health, it's how well is your body at taking energy from food, bringing it into cells, turning it into energy that's usable as opposed to storing it as fat and creating inflammation. That's what we talk about when we're talking about metabolic health. And so if we have low HDL, we want to be high, LDL, we want to be low. So that's how I always remember it. So HDL, if it is low, that's one that we want to be high. It can reflect high inflammation and poor hormone status. Your fat storing pathways are going to be kind of stuck on. So that's something that we need to address to make sure that we are not staying in that fat storing state, because when we're stuck in that fat storing state and our fat burning pathways are blocked, your body is constantly being told we have enough, let's store, despite the fact you're eating less, you're moving more, you're cutting calories, cutting carbs, fasting, all the things. It doesn't matter because that's a signaling that's happening in your body. And so when we have that low HDL, it tells us there's likely some high inflammation in there. Hormones are probably going to be struggling. So we're seeing that fat burning pathway is blocked. So your body is never getting the green light to burn fat. If we are having high triglycerides, this actually is very highly correlated to insulin resistance, poor blood sugar control. If we have too low cholesterol, this also is going to tell us we're probably going to be struggling with hormones, and can be one of the causes of hormonal imbalances. We see this very typically in women who eat very low calorie diets, like 1,200 calories less. This is very common actually. And so low cortisol or low cholesterol is not always a good thing. It can actually be one of the reasons that we're struggling. And so that's just something else to be aware of too.
Yes. And on a side note there, if you're actively in a fat loss phase and your fat loss phase is working, your triglycerides will read high on your serum test because it's part of your fat oxidation process. So just as an aside, if you are like in a fat loss phase or losing weight in any way, shape, or form at that point, and your doctor's like, oh, your triglycerides are higher, that's actually normal. So don't worry too much about it and retest in like 3 months when you're done your fat loss phase or whatever that looks like. The next one we want to talk about is the comprehensive metabolic panel. This is very common, especially for annual blood work that people get. Same with the lipid panel. Now, why the CMP or the metabolic panel kind of matters is it is a really broad look at our blood sugar control, our liver and kidney function, our electrolyte balance, and even our metabolic efficiency. So like how efficient our metabolism actually is. So let's say, for instance, so a metabolic panel will actually measure a ton of things. It's a little bit different depending on where you live or like what labs you're ordering your metabolic panel from. But some of the biggest ones are things like glucose, A1C, your liver enzymes. Some of the metabolic panels can be looking at electrolyte balance, calcium, as well as kidney enzymes and kidney function as well. Sometimes those are in different areas, but that's typically what we see on a metabolic panel. Now, some really important markers here for you would be things like elevated glucose. So if we have fasted glucose that is above 5.2 millimoles or above 94 for the other one, so it's like milligrams or something, I think, something like that, per deciliter, then what we're seeing is probably possible insulin resistance or definitely low blood sugar control. So we're not able to control our blood sugar very well. Some other ones that we see that we don't like to see are elevated liver enzymes or depressed kidney enzymes or kidney markers. So elevated liver enzymes like our ALT and AST can suggest some pretty poor detoxification function, which is something we talk about a lot here because that can help with absolutely everything else in the body, like cortisol metabolism that we see on the Dutch test, or estrogen methylation, or getting rid of our hormones or other toxins in the body. And it could potentially look at like, what do we have fatty liver? Is there something actually functionally wrong with our liver, even from like a medical standpoint? Electrolyte balance is one thing that we like to look at as well, or that we can look at on the metabolic panel. It may seem a little bit more inconsequential. It can definitely fluctuate depending on if you're dehydrated or not when you get your readings done. But if we have an imbalance of electrolytes, this could cause a lot of fatigue and like hormone signaling issues and dehydration. Remember, your electrolytes are more than just us drinking certain nutrients or having certain nutrients in our body. This is about like vitamins and minerals that actually help with us moving our muscles properly and like the nerve action that we have in our body for communication signals. So it's really important to make sure that we are getting that electrolyte balance proper. And if we have depressed kidney signals, that can tell us that, kidneys is a really big detoxification organ in our system that we don't really think about. And it can start to tell us from an optimal range, are our kidneys actually detoxifying things at the rate that we want them to detoxify? And are we peeing out the things that we want to pee out at the rate that we want to pee them out? Or are they not? And is that potentially blocking fat burning pathways or causing some inflammation?
So there was a very good question here about statins. And first, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. However, we did hear this from a doctor. He said he does not like putting clients on statins. And the reason for that was it mitochondria or metabolic health or both, Kariana, like blood sugar and mitochondria? Because he said it was both. Yeah. So with statins, the whole purpose is to help bring your cholesterol down, right? Which actually isn't like a terrible, terrible thing unless it's like super, super high, right? Like the studies coming out now, it's like, right? So there's just so many other things that are like more important than cholesterol, and we're looking at risk of different things. But he said statins, when you are on them, actually make your mitochondrial health worse. This is a very big problem because your mitochondria are so crucial for, is your body able to take energy from food, bring it into the cells and use it for energy. If it cannot, we see your energy is not so great, but also the longer it takes for food and energy to enter the cells, the more inflammation we see. Inflammation, not good for our health. The other thing is the longer it takes for food to enter the cells, the more insulin resistant we become. So statins can actually cause a lot of damage to mitochondria, which is really important for us to be able to function properly and use food for energy instead of storage, but also incredibly, like there's a massive relationship there between statins and blood sugar control and actually making you more insulin resistant. And so there are other things that I would turn to first and want to look at everything all together to see what the real issue is and how can we address that root cause without going with statins, because they're not something people should be on long term. And a lot of people don't like the side effects from it either. Statins, like when I used to work in the health region and public health, I can't tell you how many people just stopped taking it altogether because like the muscle cramping and pain and soreness was so much. And then also like if they were already pre-diabetic, it was like, that's not going to be helpful for you either. So that's just something to like be aware of. And it's like fairly new stuff that's coming out in research and stuff now, which is awesome. But sucks when you think of how many people that are on statins. So that's just something else to be aware of. Okay, next one we're going to talk about is the female hormone panel. So much good stuff here. And so these hormones matter a lot, right? They are going to influence fat distribution, where we hold on to fat. It is going to influence our mood. If the people around you say that doesn't matter, it does. They like us when we're happier, right? It's going to influence our muscle tone. It's going to influence our libido, how well our body is at burning calories, the energy that we have throughout the day. And so when we're having imbalances in these, we can see it really drive stubborn weight and really impact your energy. And when you don't have good energy, what are the things that you start doing? You don't want to go to the gym. You also don't want to have a salad, right? Like you want to veg out in front of Netflix on your couch, right? And so while we're looking at the female hormone panel, we're looking at E2, estridyl. That's going to be the first one that we're going to look at. And so if it's too low, we're going to see typically symptoms like hot flashes, mood swings, low libido, dry skin. If it's too high or too high compared to progesterone, so it could be normal, but then progesterone be low. And so then we're having estrogen dominant type symptoms. And this is going to look like bloating, PMS, tender breasts, that estrogen dominance, right? And so estrogen is best looked at with something like a Dutch test over lab work. As we know, estrogen is going to fluctuate a lot during the day, but also on a Dutch test, we can see where is it being broken down to? Is your body good at breaking down estrogen? There's 3 different pathways that we can look at. If you're not very good at keeping it in one pathway, we know you're at an increased risk of developing breast cancers. And so we have to start working on improving that specific detox pathway. Super important, making sure your liver can actually process it. And so this is where, when we're looking at hormone stuff, we love looking at the Dutch test, because we can see, like we did a whole podcast where I actually went through my personal Dutch test and went through it with you, showed you what everything meant, what we're looking at. And when we're looking at it too, it's like, okay, we're not using progesterone. What are we using that precursor for? Is it getting pushed to cortisol instead? Like we can see what your body is favoring, because that's going to impact how are we going to take these first steps? What needs to be addressed? Why are these levels the way that they are? Like that's what we need to know to be able to, address the issues appropriately. So then we're looking at progesterone. When progesterone is too low, we again can have PMS symptoms, anxiety, poor sleep. Things get under our skin a lot more. We're much more reactive. And again, all the symptoms I talked about with estrogen dominance. If it's too high, progesterone's too high, it'll also give you similar symptoms to estrogen dominance. And so this is where it can be really tricky when people try to go on HRT, is because it's based off of symptoms alone, but there's a lot of overlapping symptoms. And so this is where, again, having some testing can be really, really helpful to make sure that you are actually where you're supposed to be, right? Instead of just guessing all the time. If we are looking at progesterone, again, we like to look at the Dutch test versus serum testing, because progesterone will fluctuate throughout the day. Progesterone with the Dutch test, it's a 24-hour test. It's a 24-hour urine sample test. So we get to see it and it'll take the averages for you. So we get to see a more like consistent level. What does it actually look like, as opposed to one moment at one time in the day? Testosterone's a big one. This is a big one that I have a big pet peeve with. I hate that like people don't test it. They don't prescribe HRT for it because it can make a massive difference for you. If it is too low, we can have low energy, inability to put on muscle mass. If we struggle to put on muscle mass, our metabolism slows down. We're not as good at burning calories. We become more insulin resistant, which shoves us into that storage pathway. We struggle with low libido. If it's too high, then we get those androgen dominant type symptoms, like you get, the acne, the hair loss, facial hair around like the chin, belly fat, right? Particularly in that belly, you're going to see that weight gain, and then also insulin resistance. And so this is where we again need to look at the full picture and look at what your hormones are doing, plus the other symptoms that you're having or lab work that you have, because we need to understand what is driving what. Everything has relationships. Like, it's really frustrating when people just zoom in on one thing. They're like, oh, it's just your thyroid. It's never just your thyroid. It's what is causing your thyroid to react. Why are you having these symptoms? Is it a poor conversion thing? Is it too much inflammation? Is it too much stress? Are we not sleeping enough? Nutritional status? There are so many things that influence the why, but we're always zooming in and we forget that there's a whole human attached to the thyroid. There is so much stuff that's going to influence it, especially when we're looking at hormones. Estrogen, progesterone, there are receptors in all 11 systems in our body. So of course it's going to impact literally everything. And so we need to look at this and understand, why is this happening? Yes, we're going through perimenopause and menopause. Yes, hormone levels are going to decline, but it's rarely ever just estrogen and progesterone. There is so much more to the picture of what's going on in your bodies. Then we have DHEAS. And so when that is low, we see poor energy and really poor stress tolerance. And so this is where like recovery sucks. You're very overreactive to stuff. You feel like you're stressed and on edge all the time. If it's high, then we start having PCOS type symptoms like androgen excess, which is not a good time. I can attest to that. Not fun. Then we have DHT. And so if this is high in particular, we're typically going to see hair thinning, acne, oily skin, insulin resistance. This coincides with PCOS a lot. And again, a lot of these, as you can see, are very tied to insulin resistance, which keeps you in that storage pathway. And so everyone's like, oh, cut carbs. Cutting carbs doesn't fix testosterone. It doesn't make progesterone better. Actually, it typically makes it worse, right? And so this is where we need to understand the why. What is the driving factor behind everything? Because it's not carbs. It's not carbs. Then we have the last one in this little group is our sex hormone binding globulin. And so if it's too high, typically we're going to see low free hormones. This is one that is very often overlooked in panels for sure, or people don't even think to look at or test. If it's too low, again, we're going to see the PCOS type symptoms, more androgen dominance, more insulin resistance, driving us into that fat storage state. And so again, we need to take a better look and go, what is everything happening here? Going through your health history, how is your sleep, energy, stress, digestion? If you've had a consultation call with us, you know that we ask you a lot of questions and then we ask you more questions. And this is why I don't go in my DMs as much anymore, because you answer one, we have 3 more questions based on how you answer us. And so it's because we're trying to get this full picture to figure out what is the most likely root cause for all of these things. If we don't have all the testing with us, right, we're going to ask all those questions to really figure out what is driving your symptoms and the specific imbalances that you're having. And so that's just the hormone panel part. Carrie Ann's going to tackle vitamin B12.
Okay. So vitamin B12 is essential for energy, for our brain function, for detoxification. It's actually more important than we think. And methylation, which also affects our hormone metabolism, but it also just affects overall body detoxification of toxins as well. Our optimal range is typically between 500 and 1,000. Low levels of this vitamin B12 in the body, or our body's inability to actually methylate or utilize vitamin B12 that we can maybe get over the counter if we have any kind of genetic polymorphisms like an MTHFR. We are seeing things like brain fog, mood swings, typical menopause symptoms, unfortunately, right? Fatigue, poor recovery, poor estrogen metabolism, and even what we call poor antioxidant status. So our body's not able to actually oxidize free radicals as easily when we don't have enough vitamin B12 in our systems. People who are at higher risk are people who are choosing to be vegetarians, people who are choosing to be vegans, and people who have any kind of digestive or gut health issues, because gut inflammation will actually reduce our absorption of B12, which will then, of course, reduce our body's ability to actually have B12 inside the system to do the job that it needs to do.
Yeah, and if you are someone who's been on hormonal birth control, within 3 years, it'll deplete you of the B vitamins completely. So if you have women in your life who are on hormonal birth control, please, 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 please encourage them to take vitamin B, because you are going to see that it's really important for, like we mentioned, detoxification. When you're on hormonal birth control, it needs to be detoxed. So it needs to go through your liver. You need B vitamins for that. It's going to help them with cognitive function as well. We see a lot of times birth control makes people feel crazy, right? Where their mood swings are wild, depleting you of B vitamins. Essential for energy. If you're taking a vitamin B supplement, take it in the morning, because otherwise it can really affect your sleep, because it does provide you with so much more energy. But it does come from a lot of protein sources, right? Like eggs, amazing source of B vitamins. I have them almost every day. They're high in choline. There are so many benefits to eggs. You don't have to worry about cholesterol. But it's shown that does not increase cholesterol, so you are good. And so eggs are always a great option there as well. The next one is our CRP. This is our C-reactive protein. And so this one matters a lot, and it blows my mind that it is not tested as a standard on panels half the time. Actually blows my mind, because it is a marker of systemic inflammation. And we know you can be struggling with like low-grade chronic inflammation for like 5 to 10 years before you even start experiencing symptoms. And under the surface, when we're seeing that inflammation, inflammation blocks our fat burning pathways. So that sucks. We're going to see that it makes it very difficult to produce hormones. We're going to see it increases that fat storage. It's also going to, push you towards insulin resistance. We're going to see impaired recovery, harder time to build muscle mass, increased levels of cortisol, which if you listen to the podcast, is not a good thing when it's high all the time. And so the fact that CRP is not measured always, I just don't understand, because if we could catch this trending in the wrong direction early, like you'll be able to be so much more informed and catch things so much earlier. And so that's really important. Someone here messaged me and said that theirs were high and the doctor didn't even know what to do about it. because they have to wait till it's a certain level or something else is with it, right, to be able to give you a pill for it, which really sucks. So optimal CRP is less than 1 milligram per liter. If we have high levels, we see that chronic inflammation, poor recovery, insulin resistance can indicate the onset of autoimmune diseases and issues. And so if you're someone who has higher CRP, listen to our inflammation podcast. Again, it will be, because I could talk about inflammation, you guys, for literally 3 hours. I always say like cortisol is my favorite topic, but inflammation and cortisol and blood sugar just all go together. So I can give like a giant lecture on that, but listen to the inflammation podcast. There is so much good stuff there. Things to help with inflammation are going to be things that are going to help support your liver, bringing down cortisol and supporting your blood sugar. And so this is going to look like, anti-inflammatory foods, cutting out protein bars and protein powders and low carb breads and keto wraps. All those things can really help bring inflammation down. Your protein shakes. We just did a 4-week challenge where we took those out and people saw great results. This will look like making sure you're getting enough sleep, eating enough food, because under eating will increase cortisol, which will cause inflammation to go up. So we have a whole podcast on it. I'm not going to get too detailed on it. So I would encourage you to go and watch that if you have not listened to it yet, but it'll be in the guide on Friday for you as well.
Okay, next one that's important would be ferritin or like iron storage. So iron is critical for energy, thyroid function, oxygen transport. We often have low levels sometimes when we are in our reproductive years due to menstruation, or when we're in perimenopause, because we typically have cycles that are usually rougher or more heavy. And sometimes our body just has a really hard time actually storing iron. And we do make sure, especially when we see like Dutch tests or people who have symptoms of really low energy, we always make sure we cross it off the list, because it's a really easy test. If we have low iron, which is usually under a level of 50, we can experience things like fatigue, even hair loss, poor exercise tolerance or performance. So your body doesn't recover very well after exercise or workouts. And therefore it can kind of start to block these fat burning pathways. And again, we don't have the energy that we need in order to function the way that we need to function. If we have high levels of iron, this can actually indicate inflammation. So some people are genetically predisposed to actually overstore iron and have iron overload. And this can actually keep fat storing pathways stuck on because it creates more inflammation in the body. So making sure that we can get those tested, because again, with that bell curve, too high or too low can maybe cause the same negative results in a lot of people. So making sure they're optimal is super important.
Okay, next one is insulin, fasting insulin. So insulin is a key fat storage hormone. Insulin is not bad. First of all, like we want to have some insulin. It's what helps bring sugar into our cells. It's when we become insulin resistant and we have too much insulin in our body, which is what we're talking about here. It means that our cells, it's like you're knocking on the door and it's like, hey, open up, let me give you the sugar, muscle cells. And your body is just like, da 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 da, like you're just ignoring it. Like, you know, when you're nagging your kids and they're just so good at ignoring you, you're like insulin. And so you need to get louder and louder and louder and then get really mad if your kid listens, right? And so it's the same thing. We have insulin that is knocking on the doors. They keep bringing more insulin in to try and open it up. And so our body just isn't responding to it anymore. And so when that insulin is high, and this happens when we are in a state of stress. So you could be under eating and cutting out carbs completely. But if your body is stressed because you are on all the time, you have an increased demand on you, you are under eating, over exercising, go, rushing around, skipping breakfast, having coffee on empty stomach, all the things that we talk about on the podcast, what happens is your liver will just constantly dump sugar into your bloodstream and drive insulin up, even if you're fasting, even if you're doing all the workouts, even if you're eating clean, doesn't matter, because stress and insulin together is not a good situation. It not only pushes you into that fat storing state, it also prevents your body from being able to release fat cells to be used as energy. And so that's not good. We're not using fat. We're also just extra storing fat. And so when we're looking at high insulin, we're looking at a level greater than 6. When we see this, we're going to see more belly fat, more cravings, fatigue, poor hormone regulation. And so this is where, honestly, we want to see this lower than that, right? Like we want to make sure that we're not trending in that direction, because by the time this shows up, like your A1C, for example, on your blood work, you have already been insulin resistant for likely 5 to 10 years, which is crazy. And so we don't want to wait until that point. So as soon as we see it starting to like creep up, even if it's only a couple points, it's like, okay, we need to do something about this. We need to be serious about it and like reassess everything. And then taking that information plus everything else that we have, your health history, past stress markers, past diet history, your sleep, stress, energy, digestion, all of those things. We need to assess what's going on, right? We don't have to take berberine for insulin. Honestly, we don't push supplements really for insulin resistance at all. This can be completely reversed with your lifestyle and nutrition habits, 100%. We see this all of the time. This is one of the lab work markers, this and the lipids, those change pretty quickly in people, which is awesome. And so when we're looking at this stuff, we are paying attention more to, and we did a whole blood sugar podcast as well, so you can listen to that, insulin resistance. This has more to do with like, are you having a meal 4 to 5 hours apart? You're not grazing all day. That keeps insulin high. Are you eating enough food? Because if you're not, that stress is going to keep dumping sugar into your bloodstream. Are we prioritizing sleep? Poor sleep equals insulin resistance. What kind of exercise are you doing? What's your past stress like? The food quality. Those things are going to impact your insulin resistance so much more than any one supplement. It's harder, but it addresses the root cause. Berberine doesn't, right? And berberine also has to be cycled. You're not supposed to be on it for a long time, because then we'll see like gut health issues. Yes, then we also have to look, because it could be inflammation. There could be some hormonal components in here. It could just be stress, right? There's a lot of things that we need to look at. So I would highly recommend booking a consultation call, because as you can see, it's not just, oh, you have this is the answer. We have to see your body as a whole, because that's what is going to result in being able to see the changes that you're looking for. So definitely book a consultation call. Those are free. And that's exactly what we do on those. Because as you can see, there are a lot of factors that we need to consider when we're telling you how much you should eat, the lifestyle changes you should do, what kind of workouts you should be doing, because all of those things are going to be influenced on where your body is right now, plus your history. This is why, like The lab work alone doesn't mean anything. If someone sends me their labs, I'm like, I don't know anything about you. Like, I need to know so much more. And so this is where those consultation calls are really helpful.
So there's a little bit of an aside bonus here as well, and this is something called a HOMA IR score, HOMA. This is something that doctors should be using for especially women, but you can use it on anyone. And while it's commonly missed, this is actually an equation that shows the ratio of fasting insulin to fasting glucose and the relationship between them to help us indicate insulin resistance in the body. And this actually is much more effective than just looking at our levels of insulin and glucose fasted, because both of them might be in range, but that doesn't mean that insulin resistance isn't actually present. So we commonly see women come in with lab work where doctors tell them that it's normal and they have normal fasting insulin and normal fasting glucose, but we run a HOMA IR score and see that their doctor actually missed this major indication of insulin resistance. From an indication or an equation standpoint, we do want to see that your HOMA IR score with the relationship between glucose and insulin is under 2. And we see a lot of over 2s, even though your insulin and your glucose is actually normal on your blood work. So something to look out for as well. You can actually just go online and Google how to do your HOMA IR calculation if you want to insert your stuff in there, and it'll give you a number and you'll be able to kind of make some decisions off of that too if you wanted.
Perfect. Next one is homocysteine. Why does it matter? It is a marker of methylation as well as cardiovascular risk. And so when we see those levels higher, we know that we're likely struggling with some detoxification issues, which we know poor detoxification means our liver is struggling. We're going to see more inflammation, more toxins recirculating, more likely to experience estrogen dominance. Toxins are also going to end up getting stored in our fat cells because our body doesn't want those toxins to, harm our organs and other things. And so when it goes into our fat cells, it changes the structure of those fat cells, making them even harder to break down because we're struggling with that enough already, right? And so it does that on purpose. So this is where we need to, again, look at, okay, now we've got some liver stuff that we need to look at. It's also going to affect your hormone metabolism as well because of the impact that liver has on that. And so if we see a high homocysteine number, typically we're going to see like a poor B12 or folate status. So typically we're going to need some more B vitamins in there. We see increased disease risk, impaired estrogen breakdown. And so this tells us, okay, we're seeing some inflammation and struggling breaking things down. This is likely specifically has to do more so with the liver than anything else. And so then we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper as well. Then we have certain tests that are considered significantly more accurate when taken as a urine metabolite test over 24 hours compared to the blood work that we just went over. And this is the Dutch test. This is something that we do with every single client that we do in our coaching program. We do offer those as well and sell them as one-offs, where then you get your whole report. We break it down. We hop on a Zoom call with you. We tell you exactly what you're dealing with, why, recommendations based off of that, and things like that. And then you get to have that report as well, because when you get the Dutch test results back, there's just like arrows and dials, and you're like, I don't know what any of this means, but it doesn't look good, right? You get stressed out. And so when we look at the Dutch complete test, it is way better for evaluating hormone metabolism and your adrenal health in a much greater depth than we're looking at the standard serum testing. And so here's the hormones that we spoke about beforehand relate. So when we use our Dutch Complete for a deeper and more accurate dive into specifically sex hormone production and clearance. So is your body good at producing it? Does it have all the pieces that it needs to be produced? Can it also break it down and get rid of them? Because if it can't, that's also a massive issue. How is your adrenal health, your cortisol rhythm and output? Are you having high cortisol at the right times of day? Is it coming back down? Is it spiking when it's not supposed to? Can your body create it, or is your body really struggling? Can your body break it down? These things all matter. So for me specifically, my cortisol was really, really high and my body was not so great at breaking it down. It was like my bathtub was overflowing and then the drain was clogged and it was just not able to get rid of it. And so that made specifically what I had to do for me, right? I had that plan. It was amazing. I've never dropped weight the way I did, which was amazing, by making really specific things based on that testing. It also shows you hormone detox pathways, phase 1 and phase 2 estrogen metabolism. This is important because if we are favoring the wrong pathways, like I mentioned, there's a higher risk of developing breast cancers with some. And so that really helps us be proactive with that. It helps us be able to support your liver and do things to help you with your health, but also we know if we're not breaking down estrogen properly, we're going to see way more inflammation, things recycle, we're going to have a body that favors fat storage. And so being able to address, okay, we're struggling with this because of liver, right? So now we got to address that specifically. We can see androgen metabolism, so DHEA, testosterone, DHT. So for myself, we were able to see that, okay, I have low testosterone. And so a lot of people would give you, like DHEAS and things like that to help you produce those things. If they would have given me DHEA, I would have had the craziest symptoms of androgen dominance, because when my body is stressed, we could very clearly see my body is not going to produce testosterone. It is shuttling everything to androgens. I would become more insulin resistant. I would start gaining weight. I would start getting acne, oily skin. Not a great situation to be in. And so this is where really understanding what is your body favoring and why, and then taking your symptom history and your health history to figure out what exactly does your body need right now, instead of just guessing all the time.
Okay, so some specific things that we like to assess, and it's better assessed with the Dutch test, would be things like a complete female hormone picture. So it likes to look at all of our estrogens, our progesterone and our progesterone metabolites, our testosterone, two metabolites of testosterone. It looks at DHEAS, so how are we sulfating our DHEA? DHT, which is that secondary androgen, and it can even infer a few indications of that sex hormone binding globulin, although I would argue that SHBG can only be measured in blood. But the Dutch will show us free hormone levels, estrogen progesterone balance, and all of the metabolites of all of our estrogens, all of our estrogen detox pathways that go through phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox, our methylation, our COMT, all of the things. And this can help us assess estrogen dominance, detoxification, even cancer risk pathways, which can be really important.
And then, like I mentioned, we have cortisol. So it's going to provide you that full adrenal picture, which is really helpful, because I was one of those people. I was like, I'm not stressed. I love my job. I love my life. I'm so fulfilled. It's busy, but it's normal. And it's so much better than the trauma that I dealt with growing up. Like, things are good. And then I got it back and I was like, okay, we cannot deny that your girl is stressed. And so that was like very good for me, because it was like, you're not the exception to the rule. And then pairing that with the information that I get from my Aura Ring, super helpful, that like, okay, I am doing a lot of stress, right? Like I do have a lot, and I need to take my self-care and what I do for my adrenals so much more seriously. And so the Dutch test will provide that full adrenal picture. It'll include your free cortisol, is your body breaking down cortisol, that daily rhythm, which is so much more informative. Honestly, cortisol levels measured in blood is crap. I don't even think you should do it. I think it's a waste of time, because if I would have went in, taken it in the morning, it would have been fine, because it's supposed to be high then. You don't know if it's staying high longer. You don't know if it's peaking at nighttime and that's what's waking you up. You don't know if it's really low when it's not supposed to. And so honestly, blood work, cortisol levels are really, really not useful. The other thing that I like about the Dutch test, it does show your cortisone levels. And that reflects like how good your body is at breaking down and getting rid of cortisol, or like deactivating it. So your body's keeping your body safe by having less active cortisol, which can be very destructive. And so sometimes we see both are very high, which is good. That means like you're creating a lot of cortisol. Your body's good at like breaking it down, but it also shows us your body is working really hard to try and protect you. And that doesn't last super long. And so we've seen it where people are like end up being low in both, where it's like your body was just dealing with it for a very long time, right? And so this is where having that nice full picture can be so incredibly important.
One other thing that the Dutch test measures would be kind of just like our full androgen profile here. So it measures DHEA, but then it also measures how it's getting sulfated into other forms, and then how stress or other things might be impacting the way that your androgens are being shuttled over certain pathways. So just like Steph was talking about with her androgens, she didn't have a lot of testosterone, but she had a lot of other secondary androgens that ended up being very high, which was usually stress or inflammation induced. So we can start to look at these things like, how is your testosterone testosterone relating to your DHT and your etioquinone and all these other secondary androgens. And those other things can indicate certain things like androgenic activity or inflammation pathways, or other things like your body might be shuttling things too fast through testosterone. And we're getting these high levels of testosterone metabolites like DHT, but we still have low testosterone. So other than, besides that blood test telling us your testosterone is low, on the Dutch test, we can actually look at, okay, is her testosterone low because she's not producing enough? Or is her body so stressed that they're just shuttling testosterone through the pathway? And now we see all these really high levels of other androgens down the pathway. And that's actually stress induced. And we have a detox issue, and we actually need to slow your body down, and then testosterone will be fine. And we don't even have to give you anything to help with that.
And like, that's really important because with low testosterone, typically people are going to tell you to work out harder, right? Resistance training is supposed to like stimulate it. If I were to have done that, I would have made it worse because that would have been extra stress that my body couldn't tolerate. And so this is why having that information is so important, because it does really influence, okay, what is the action plan for right now based on where your body is? Because pushing harder most of the time ends up being quite detrimental for the women that we end up working with. And so while partially informed by Dutch, right, there are going to be some things that are better for blood work. Thyroid panel, obviously. They are not included in the Dutch. Thyroid should always be assessed with blood work. Vitamin D, B12, ferritin, that CRP inflammatory marker, insulin, glucose, your homocysteine, your blood lipids. Those are all nutrient, inflammation, metabolic, or cardiovascular disease markers, and those ones do need blood work. And so this is where having both can be very helpful. Those are typically going to be things that come up on your regular lab work. So if you have those, that is awesome. That is one good starting point. But again, it's not going to tell you anything else about like metabolism, where your hormones are at. The stress response is honestly, the stress response and understanding your liver in terms of how it detoxes are probably two of the biggest game changers and most overlooked items that we see in women who are struggling. It's like that missing piece of, oh, this is where we're at.
So let's give a couple examples of things that we might be able to pair with the Dutch test and blood work for some more crucial insights into how the body actually runs. So first example would be thyroid panel. So if we have thyroid hormones, we know that they regulate your metabolic rate, but our adrenal stress and our cortisol can actually suppress thyroid function and that T4 to T3 conversion. So if your T3 is low, let's say in your blood work, and your reverse T3 is high, and your Dutch test is showing us that you have high cortisol or high metabolized cortisol, this actually indicates that we have a stress-driven thyroid suppression. So thyroid medication is not going to help you. You not training so hard and being so stressed is actually the one thing that's going to help with that conversion. So you would do like certain nutritional strategies, maybe selenium or iodine, if not autoimmune, or managing cortisol with adaptogens, circadian alignment, de-stressing, all of the things. And without seeing both, you might be, again, prescribed thyroid meds, or you might be overprescribed like adaptogens that are not helping because we didn't actually get to look at, is your cortisol metabolism because of your thyroid conversion, or is it the other way around? So we get to kind of see that whole picture.
And this is like Rachel Shear shared this today. She's one of my mentors and she's phenomenal in the functional health space, probably one of the people I look up to the most. And she made a post, I don't know if it was today or the other day, but she was talking about like, if you go see a functional doctor or a functional practitioner and all they do is prescribe you a ton of supplements after doing your tests, that is the exact same thing as going to a doctor and all they're doing is taking tests and then giving you pills. Nobody is addressing the root cause, because if you are given all these supplements, if you're giving all these medications, guess what? The thing that's causing it is still happening. And you're just going to make yourself more resistant to the medications that you're having. All supplements and medications have to go through liver detoxification. You're adding more burden there, increasing more inflammation. They're going to end up taking another medication to try and help with that, as opposed to just dealing with the root cause right at the beginning. And that ends up being so much better for your long-term health, right? You'll get to be here for longer. When you are here longer, you get to be here at a healthier, like age and lifespan and quality of life, right? And so those are all things that really drive me crazy, is that nobody's asking why. Like, that's the real problem. Why is this happening? That's the question that needs to be answered. And then how do we address that why? It's not just, oh, because you're aging. That is the biggest load of crap anyone's ever said. Now that you know how I feel about that, let's move on to a different example here. Okay, so let's talk nutrient levels. So we're looking at B12, vitamin D, and iron here. And so vitamin D is going to help regulate your immune health, your sex hormone binding globulin, your steroid hormone production. We know that if your immune health is good, inflammation is going to be down, and it's good, right? If our immune system is like overactive or it's really depleted, we're going to see that you get sick more often. There's going to be more inflammation that's going to drive insulin resistance, a worse stress response. So cortisol can go unmatched and cause all these other issues in your body. And so if we are looking at, let's say, low vitamin D, that could be contributing to why you're struggling with low estrogen or testosterone that we see on a Dutch test. It can also impair proper estrogen detoxification, which then affects methylation. Our body is not good at breaking stuff down. We're seeing more inflammation, all that stuff. Then we see B12, which is also required for methylation and is essential for estrogen detox, and that's low, right? And so when we're looking at all of this together, if the Dutch shows an elevated 4-OH estrogen and we see low methylated estrogens, and our blood work is showing, we're struggling with low B12 or high homocysteine, we know there's a methylation issue here, which means we need to address your liver. Your liver is what's driving everything to slow down. We're seeing more inflammation here. We're seeing that your body is going to be struggling to produce hormones. You're going to see, again, everything gets reabsorbed. We don't want that. And so this, again, will show us, okay, for this person specifically, instead of the stress driving factor, which stress does influence liver, this is more specific to liver, where we know we got to start eating more cruciferous veggies. We're maybe having some more dandelion tea. We're adding lemon to our water. There are lots of things that we can do with nutrition and lifestyle to help support that, which is always really overlooked, right? There's no medication that's going to fix that, like none. We need to address this before things, turn into like fatty liver disease, which we don't want.
Something else that we can look at, for example, is something like insulin resistance and metabolic health. So if your fasting insulin or glucose or your HOMA IR score is high and your Dutch test shows elevated testosterone, DHEA, DHT, 5-alpha androstenediol, and maybe your lab test shows low sex hormone binding globulin, this is likely an insulin-driven PCOS or like metabolic pattern that we're seeing. But without this combination, we could actually just misdiagnose you as having PCOS or like, ovarian issues or androgen issues that are just purely adrenal. And we don't even look at the insulin connection to them. Another example would be cholesterol. If we have cholesterol that's really low and our Dutch test shows us that we have low DHEA, testosterone, estrogen, those are all hormones that are made with cholesterol, this actually suggests that the body just doesn't have enough cholesterol to make your hormones. So we need to eat more cholesterol and maybe a little more saturated fat in our diet. If our LDL, which is our bad cholesterol, is high, but our estrogen clearance is really poor on the Dutch test, maybe our methylation's at like 4%, this can actually indicate that we have estrogen buildup from poor bile clearance, and it's not just our diet. So again, this is something that we can fix with fixing our digestive tract, fixing the way that our body is detoxifying things, and we're not actually having to go on statins or cholesterol medication because it's actually a bile clearance issue and it had nothing to do with just the fact that you had high LDL cholesterol.
And like some of these things, it's not anything fancy. Like what we end up doing, like it might be like, oh my gosh, my liver. It's like, yeah, we're increasing certain foods, we're decreasing stress, decreasing stress, we're increasing our hydration. Like there are simple things that if we really hit home on, make a huge difference. But most of us are like, oh no, it must have to be something complicated. Because how could something work if it's not complicated? Because everything I've tried that's simple before hasn't worked. And it's like, but you're not choosing the right things for your specific body and where it's at right now. You're a specific root cause. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. This is why the cookie cutter stuff just doesn't work. You need to understand where your body is at. So the next example that we have is, looking at our CRP, that inflammatory marker. We know that if that is high, it's going to suppress your hormone receptor sensitivity. So this is the whole lock and key. You can pump your body full of hormones, and then you feel like crap. I'm doing a podcast on this. It's coming out right away. And so with the key, your hormone, if it can't go in the lock and turn the lock, it doesn't matter, right? So this is where we need to make sure that lock can receive the hormone. And this is where inflammation comes into play. And so we know that chronic inflammation is going to suppress that sensitivity and alter your cortisol metabolism specifically. And so what we can see sometimes is we have that elevated CRP. which suppresses that hormone receptor sensitivity. We can see maybe it's paired with a flat cortisol curve or really high reverse T3 on your labs. And this suggests that inflammation is driving burnout and your metabolic dysfunction. And so it's not necessarily that you're doing too much, it's that we have too much inflammation in our body that's causing that burnout. And so no bubble baths are going to fix that, right? We can see that maybe estrogen's being poorly broken down because of that inflammation, right? And so then we're seeing more estrogen dominance. And so this is where all these things pairing it together is so incredibly important. So you want to think of like blood labs as your hardware check. You know, this is your nutrients, your structure, your raw materials, and the Dutch test is like your software readout. So how the hormones are actually being produced and processed and cleared. So blood work is like the actual computer, like the actual like bits and pieces and wires. The Dutch test is your thing up to date, right? Like which iOS are you running or whatever, I don't know. I don't speak tech. This was a terrible example, but it is what it is. And so what we want to do is we want to combine that software and the hardware together to be able to use precision and targeted interventions rather than just guessing all the time. Because that's where we get frustrated, right? Like we're like, man, I'm doing everything right and it's not working. And it's like, oh, really? All it was is your liver. And we just had to do like these things to get things going, plus the right stuff, right? Or, you know, it was a stress thing. So we had to spend some more time with adrenals. Or it was mostly driven by inflammation or your gut health or your hormones or whatever it might be, right? And I think with thyroid specifically, that's the thing that makes me the most frustrated is that you get so much runaround. It takes forever to get tested because people only test TSH, which is the biggest joke ever because that's rarely ever the issue. We see so many things get misdiagnosed or it takes forever to get diagnosed and they just give you medication, but that's not the problem. Nobody figures out and does a full comprehensive look of what is driving this. What's the root cause? Because you can give a pill, but that doesn't fix the problem. The chaos is still happening under the surface, right? And so this is where getting everything together is so, so important. And so with that covers up the Dutch and the labs as briefly as we could. I mean, it still took over an hour. I'm surprised it didn't go longer, honestly. Right. But also book that consultation call. Like this is what they are used for. I don't believe that you should have to pay someone to help you figure out where your body's at so you can get some sort of guidelines and better understanding as to what's going on. This is what we love. We love teaching. We love giving you this information. We love giving you guidance because we've learned it. We want you to know it so that you can figure it out for your body. You can be that person leading your family. You can get people more support, give them the education they need. We just want to help as many women as possible because I don't think, unfortunately, the health system is necessarily doing its best job right now. We get a lot of nurses actually who are coming in and we actually had someone say their medical director told them to come to us and get Dutch testing because we're just behind and stuff. Preventative medicine is not great. We're not good at looking ahead. We're not good at looking at the whole body. It's very segmented. It's very focused on we'll treat you once you have disease. And so this is what we're here for. And we love it so much. So just by hopping on those free consultation calls, you help us let us do what we love, which we love also. Again, we love you guys so much and just want to help you as much as you can. If you can share the podcast, that always means a lot too, so you can reach more people. But yeah, I love you guys so much. If you have questions, please reach out and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.